There have been a few instances where people in my life, knowing what I do on this channel, have asked the question, why mods? I cover full games fairly often, but in the limited capacity that I am known online, I am known as the mod guy. Most of my videos are about mods, that's what I do the most. And I think this mod serves as a perfect answer to that question. The Forgotten City is among those special fan projects to have its own sort of Cinderella story. This is a 2015 mod for Skyrim that in 2021 was remade into its own game in the Unreal Engine that you can buy on Steam right now. Nearly everything that makes this game good, everything that makes it creative and unique and such a well-written story began in this humble little mod project for Skyrim. This video is a review and analysis of both the mod and the game, exploring the seeds for the latter which existed in the former, and the elevations that the project as a game made on its foundations as a mod, particularly when it comes to its themes and narrative ideas. The Forgotten City begins as much of Skyrim's content does, either by courier invitation or player exploration. You are either beckoned to the Forgotten Ruin, or you find it organically on your own, hidden in this waterfall near Markarth. In this ruin, you meet Cassia, an Imperial Legion deserter who lost her brother in this big hole in the middle of the ruin. She promised her brother that she wouldn't go after him, so she hired the famous looter of caves and ruins, the Dragonborn himself. Fair enough. At the bottom of this pit is what else but the Forgotten City, or what's left of it. All of this so far feels very Skyrim. You are invited to a ruin, there's a person telling you an objective within the ruin, finding her brother, and then you delve into the depths of the ruin and find the remains of an old civilization. If you've played Skyrim, you've done this 20 times over, no sweat, but what makes the Forgotten City so memorable is the deviations it begins to make right here. A dead man hangs from a tree, illuminated by light. You hear his voiceover as you read the note at his foot. It's noticeably well acted.
I have spent a lifetime in this place, going around in circles, searching for a way out. But there are only two choices: death or the door to the house on the lake. I urge you to learn from my mistakes. Best to take your own life now.
I mean that with 100%, with 1,000%.
In order to get the key to the lake house over there, you have to wander through this spooky temple, hearing the ghost of the hanged man warn you to turn back like you're in a haunted house. Killing the ghost and finding the key begins the cyclical quest which makes up the Forgotten City's plot, and which led to the fate of the hanged man. In the lake house, there's a note from the ruler of this forgotten town telling of a tragedy which caused its current ruin. The note pleads for you to go back in time and stop whatever person or event caused this catastrophe so long ago. This is a time travel, time loop story which is remarkably more of a mystery drama than even the mystery quests in Skyrim itself. It is, I think, the closed off nature of the Forgotten City which can be credited for this. The Forgotten City is one quest in one town that you cannot leave. The claustrophobia is a perfect tension builder for Skyrim specifically, a game which otherwise is all about letting you loose, allowing the player to quit or begin objectives at any time. You are locked in this city until you figure out what's really going on. Going back through the doors transports you through time, and the real game begins. The Forgotten City is under what the residents call the Dwarves' Law. Nobody knows what happens, but if anyone in the town commits a crime, the many shall suffer for the sins of the one. If you're anything like me, you immediately want to see what happens. You pull out your sword and...
Get out of my sight. I'm sick of you. Get away from me, peasant. I don't want anyone seeing us together.
For the sins.
I guess it's probably pretty obvious what with the big metal guys all over the place, but the confirmation is nice. This makes up the loop of the Forgotten City. The many shall suffer for the sins of the one a good amount of times in your investigation, and each time you can go back to the lake house to start the day over again. This zone is fairly small, but it's tight, and it's packed with people to talk to, secrets to uncover, and clues to arrange into the full picture of what's going on. When you pick up an item in one loop and that loop is ended, you keep all of your items, which creates a funny little situation when it comes to Rikus, this big Nord man. His defining feature, aside from being the big Nord guy, is his perfectly preserved dwarven armor. There's nothing else like it in the mod. Do you Do you want that armor? I kinda want that armor. Do you guys? I did this before I even realized I needed this armor set for a quest objective. As silly as you can make this if you play it like I do, the writing contained in this mod is actually very strong. This town is a ticking time bomb waiting for one of these characters to set it off, and it's your job as investigator to find out each character's flaws and motivations towards an act of violence, theft, or some such other crime. Like any good mystery story, there are a variety of red herrings and false starts. That Nord with the armor is homophobic and keeps sending letters to the gay town grocer. One of the nobles is using a secret identity to disguise his shady past with the Dark Brotherhood. Many of the characters in this town have motivation to act out or break the dwarves' law in some way, which makes puzzling out who's really behind all this that much more engaging. There is very little combat in the Forgotten City, but of the combat that does exist, it plays identically to that of the main game, which is to say that it's not very good. It is a blessing then that the mod introduces it so sparingly. Almost all of the Forgotten City is exploration and dialogue, the latter it eventually won an award for. The Forgotten City won an Australian Writers Guild Award for its writing in 2016, and I probably don't have to tell you how rare it is that a game mod wins a screenwriting award. In fact, it's so rare that the Forgotten City was the first to ever do it. In part due to this initial success, the dev made the transition into formal game development, and 6 years later, the Forgotten City is a full game of its own. The bulk of this video will be spent in discussion of the 2021 video game The Forgotten City as opposed to the 2015 mod The Forgotten City, because not only does the game follow the same story as the mod, it expands on it. The two biggest changes that the 2021 release makes to its 2015 counterpart is its setting and its expanded thematic focus. As a mod for Skyrim, The Forgotten City took place in the Elder Scrolls universe. The city was dwarven, magic was a common thing that just was. When a character would invoke a god, it would be Stendar or whoever else. And this is fine, this setting doesn't detract from the story, but it doesn't necessarily add anything to it either. Free from its fealty to a base game, the Forgotten City as game is set in a context much more fitting for the story it wishes to tell. Rather than being a dwarven city, the player finds themselves in an ancient Roman one, and the whole of the game is steeped in the history of ancient Rome, and to a lesser extent ancient Greece and Egypt. This is a big improvement, in part because its aesthetic is more clearly defined, its characters more situated, and its world more relatable, but a little more interesting to me is the ways in which the historical set dressing fits the plot and themes of the work. The intertwining of its history and its plot begins quite soon after the player enters the time loop, as a guard character explains the Roman practice of decimation, a form of collective punishment, to the player in comparison to the Golden Rule, setting a historical, concrete framework for a community's acceptance of such a radical threat of force.
They just divided us into groups of 10, made us draw straws, and whoever drew the short straw had to be executed by the other 9. Didn't matter whether he'd done anything wrong. One of us in 10 would die for the crimes of the collective. We call it decimation. If that seems like rough justice to you, you're in for a rude shock. Because the Golden Rule is exactly 10 times worse. The magistrate can explain the rest.
The Forgotten City's narrative in the mod hinted at a lot of things, but said very few things directly. One of the key aspects of the detective story going on was that pretty much every person in the town had something about them which could feasibly lead them to break the dwarves' law. Pretty much nobody's hands were really clean, and this in the end made up a large part of the point the Forgotten City tried to bring across. In the true ending of the mod, you meet a character surrounded by light, the original founder of the settlement. This guy's story is that he found the true secret of this place, an extremely powerful new mineral. Upon witnessing it being turned into a weapon, the Arbiter, that's his name, decided to impose the Hobbesian nightmare state that you find yourself in for the length of this mod. He created perfect harmony for all eternity. But from your investigation, you know that this cannot be the case. Everyone has something that could lead them to steal, or to kill, or to sin. It is a simple message in the end. Nobody's perfect. And it is commendable how the mod provides an option to convince the Arbiter that his plan is doomed from the start, a la the Master in Fallout. But that being said, the game takes a decidedly more nuanced approach to this theme. In the game, it is demonstrated not merely that a sinless utopia is not possible, but it's demonstrated that even in a scenario where a sinless utopia was enforced, people would still find a way to work around the rules. For example, example, one of the town merchants is selling what she describes only as a way out of the city at an exorbitant price. 2 town members took out loans to pay the cost on the condition that they work the cost off for 30 years. This obviously didn't really matter to them because they'd be out of there anyway, but what the merchant gave them is a vial of hemlock, a poison. You even find out that the loan giver and the merchant were working together to give the merchant some cash and the loan giver what are effectively slaves. This by all means should break the golden rule. The merchant lies and, depending on how you look at it, steals money, and the loan giver is practicing slavery and I suppose usury as well. But hemlock will get these people out of the city in a way, and by taking the loan, the poor consumers are of their own will signing a contract. These actions are morally wrong and sinful, but they do indeed follow the letter of the law, even if not the spirit of it. Can you tell that the lead developer was a lawyer before getting into game development? Further, ambiguity in moral laws can have unintended consequences for people who would otherwise be living good lives. Just like in the mod, one of the townsfolk is a gay man, but in the game, the ambiguity of what the golden rule actually considers a sin, on top of the threats he receives from the town brute, lead him to repress his own desires out of a fear for breaking the golden rule. This is a person who's done nothing wrong. He's one of the nicest characters in both tellings of the story, and the juxtaposition of how the golden rule negatively impacts his life versus how it positively impacts the life of the shady merchant woman selling suicide and inducing slavery can tell us a lot about the ethical philosophy that the game is parsing through. Fuck static moral laws. All my homies hate static moral laws. I'm coming for you, Emmanuel. This political philosophical angle of the game's story is my biggest takeaway as a student currently studying those exact 2 things, but there's also a lot that the mod has to say about history and culture. In particular, how we interpret the past subjectively and how we, or any civilization, builds on those who came before. One of the most staggering twists the Forgotten City throws at you is the revelation that this Roman city was built quite literally on top of a Greek one, and the Greek one on top of an Egyptian one, and the Egyptian one on top of a Sumerian one. The entity controlling the Golden Rule experiment, later discovered to be the god of the underworld, has been running it for a long time, and every time one civilization fails, it's painted over. The experiment starts again to see if new civilizations might have in their time and place learned from the mistakes, indeed the sins of the past. Each new civilization sublates the former, incorporating aspects it finds agreeable under a new name. The gods stay roughly similar, there's influence in culture, architecture, language, etc., but not everything from the past is learned from. Not everything is quote-unquote improved or advanced over time. The ethical themes of the story apply the same message to individuals that the historical themes apply to broader civilizations. Conflict is kind of inevitable in the affairs of humans. The writing of the mod seems to imply that this is some sort of human nature, and while I personally take some issues with that idea, the thesis still works from the perspective of someone who believes more in conflict as a natural consequence of competitive economic and social— Damn it, I'm back on the philosophy thing again, aren't I? The connection between the ethical and historical themes of the story is what makes the game's narrative so much more complex and mature than it was as a mod. That being said, in conclusion, the takeaway from this project is not it was good as a mod, but the hallowed status of game made it amazing. The truth is that the seeds for what became of this game were there from the start. The same story, many of the same characters, plot lines, and twists. The brilliance of the Forgotten City as game existed largely the same as it was in Skyrim, because it wasn't the Unreal Engine or the Gamebryo engine which made the Forgotten City such a memorable experience. It was the team who did that. Beyond it just being kind of fun and interesting, I do what I do on this platform to highlight mods and mod creators as professional in their own right, specifically so that we may see more stories like this one, and see them in the light that they deserve to be seen. There are mods out there that are smart, creative, fun, and full of serious ideas worth picking apart with the rest of them. An amateur doesn't change as much as we like to think they do when they become a professional. Professional is just the label we apply to creatives whose so-called amateur work we judge as valuable. In the end, the art remains nevertheless. Thank you very much to my patrons and my channel members, without whom I would not be able to make videos, especially ones like this. A special thank you to Adam Souza, An Entire Box of Salt, Autumn Vector, Bastard27, Bear Van Helsing, Carskill Golden, Dominus Pyrite, Grumpy Oscar, Holly Jenka, It's Ducktastic, Jack Bradley, Michael Aversa, Ryan Little, Spritz, Talia Hemke, and Zachary Shannon. If you'd like to support my work, you can donate per video on Patreon or monthly via YouTube channel memberships. All of the links are in the description. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.